Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for tuning into Season 3, Episode 2 of Celestial Oddities, the PONG, Paranormal Guys podcast. I am your host, Frater Crow.
And I'm your co-host, Daniel James.
And we bring you our show through Brutal Business Entertainment and Celestial Oddities Radio, bringing you 100% real and raw underground entertainment. If you're listening out there, whether listening live, streaming after the fact, or you've downloaded it to your device for on the go, we do want to thank you for your patronage and support. Just make sure you click the like, share, and follow button on whatever platform you're tuning in from, whether it be iTunes, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Deezer, Spreaker, CastBox, Google Play, Amazon Podcasts, or any of the other platforms in between. We air across absolutely everywhere, so listen where it's comfortable, but by clicking those buttons, it moves us up the podcast community rankings, allows more people to discover the show, keeps you in the loop with new episodes as they air, and gives you unfiltered access to our past archives. And folks, there's something for absolutely everyone out there, whether it be this show here, Celestial Oddities, where we deep dive into subject matter pertaining to paranormal and supernatural phenomena, bring professionals on within those fields, or even take on phone calls from around the world from listeners just like you to hear your amazing stories of the unexplained. Or it be one of our other shows like Knights of the Nephilim podcast, based on esoteric science, occult doctrine, ritual magic, and bringing on authors, practitioners, ritual toolmakers, mystics, and theologians. Or it be our last show, Uncovering the Underground, where we talk to and interview artists in the fields of music and modeling, stars of the big screen, comedy, oddities, and everything in between. We always aim to give you the best underground entertainment. So make sure you check out our other shows, our other seasons and past episodes. There's something for absolutely everyone. If you know someone out there that would love our shows, share it with them. Spread the news around. It's always helpful, does more than you might realize when you get us out there. Now, if you have any suggestions of what you want to see us do with the show, do differently with the show, guests you want to see us have on the show, or topics you want to see us discuss, feel free to drop us a line at celestialoddities@gmail.com. Again, that is celestialoddities@gmail.com. We answer back daily, so you don't have to worry about not getting a response. We will reach back out to you. We love to hear what it is you have to say. You can also check out Celestial Oddities group page on Facebook. It's a community where everyone can discuss, supernatural topics and meet one another, and just a safe haven for you to discuss your experiences or things that you're into with no judgment. So please feel free to check that out. And lastly, please feel free to, if you are listening to the show out there, listen where you want. But if you would like to go to Spreaker, it's just spelled Spreaker, and you can find that at Spreaker.com or through Spreaker on the app market. That'll not only allow you to listen to the show, but does allow you to also instant message us during the show, so that we can read off your comments. You can engage with us during the show, or you can ask questions to our guests, or just questions to us in general. We love having you do that and be a part of it, so feel free to do that. And thank you to each and every one of you that support our show. So Daniel, tonight we have a fun one that I know me personally, I've been wanting to talk about this subject for years. It's one of my favorite subjects in the paranormal altogether, but for some reason it hasn't happened now until Season 3, so I'm very excited to jump in tonight.
Yeah, man, I'm certainly ready to investigate this esoteric paranormal sort of geographical location.
Now, folks, if you're not familiar with what we are talking about tonight we are speaking of the Aokigahara Forest in Japan, which is oftentimes referred to as the suicide forest because of the high number of deaths that happen within this forest. And when we say high, it's high. I mean, it's very, very high. And we'll deep dive into more about the forest itself, its history, what goes on there, what you can imagine if you want to visualize what's going on there. And we'll just deep dive into this matter right after this.
Are ghosts real? Several recent encounters suggest there might be more things in heaven and earth than we can dream of.
So are werewolves just a Hollywood creation, or do half-man, half-wolf creatures really exist? Now, tonight, we kick off our Conspiracy Theory Month series, which was a...
The legend of the vampire actually goes back for centuries, and it exists in some form or another in almost every culture. In fact, some people believe the first vampire story was in the Bible.
Well, for decades, only crackpots and crazy people believed in UFOs. That's what I thought anyway. And then in recent years, it turns out that governments have been taking them seriously all along.
Try and clear up an ancient mystery with the help of a prominent veterinarian who says she can prove that Bigfoot exists and that he's related to all of us.
New reports, 5 pilots coming forward over the weekend saying they've had multiple mid-air encounters with high-flying, fast-moving objects.
All right, folks, we are here on Celestial Oddities, the PONG Paranormal Guys podcast tonight, talking about the Aokigahara Forest in Japan, and we are ready to deep dive into it. And for those that are not familiar with this name or this forest, it is at the base in the bottom of Mount Fuji in Japan. It is not only called the Aokigahara Forest, which is its proper name, it is also known as Jakai, which stands for the Sea of Trees, because it is so densely populated by forest and trees that if you're standing higher on the mountain and look down, it looks like you're looking at ocean waves of green, which is the treetops. With that being said, it's very, very dense to the point where light does not shine very easily through the tree canopies to the base of the floor. So when you're walking through the forest during the day even, it is very dark and gloomy and hard to see. It also causes it to be very cold and kind of chilled in the air. You can feel that even during the summer months, it has a coolness to it. And one of the other very interesting things I found, there's many interesting things we'll talk about this evening, but the animal population is very low. You do not see a lot of wild deer running around, birds, what we might see over here in the States like chipmunks or squirrels or rabbits. You're not seeing a lot of that. And that right there throws a red flag to me. When you go into a forest and you're not hearing birds and you're not seeing animals running around or scaring something out of the bushes, very often or at all, something's off, because usually what is the first thing that's going to sense that something's not right is animals. So when you go into that forest and it's quiet and it's cold and it's dark even during the day and during the summer, you don't see animals, it just kind of sets the scene. And most people that go there do talk about the fact that it has a very just strange, very dense feeling to the air and to the atmosphere. So that's what we're going to be talking about tonight, is this fascinating forest. Now, we said that its name's Aokigahara Forest, or Jakai, which stands for the Sea of Trees, but it's more commonly known as the Suicide Forest. Now, the reason that is on every single year, there is at least 100 or more suicides that take place within this stretch of forest. And if you take time to think about that, guys, that is insane. Over 100 people every single year kill themselves in this forest. And they're not all from Japan. They're from all over the world. People travel thousands of miles to come here and take their own life. So much so that Japan has decided not to release statistics of the numbers anymore. They don't say how many officially died this year, how many have died overall in the forest. They quit publicizing these numbers for the fear of it continuously causing this to be a place that people seek out to do this, because they're coming on their own. They don't need to push it any further and cause more, publicity for it, because they're already getting over 100 people a year. And this has been going on for decades and decades. Maybe even, they don't have the statistics anymore, but it'd be safe to say for at least 100 years now that this has been happening. So if you think of 100 people a year for 100 years, that's a shit ton of people. So we're going to deep dive into, what exactly might be going on there. But Dan, what do you think about this fascinating place? Isn't it strange to have this one location that so many people flock to ultimately end their life?
Yeah, it's very bizarre and, like I mentioned, very esoteric, very mysterious. There's a lot of questions I have as to, why. The question is, why this place over another? Now, we know that there are specific bridges in the United States that are commonly used for suicide as well, the San Francisco Bridge being one of them.
Well, what's interesting? That's actually number 1 in the world. So the Aokigahara Forest is the number 2 suicide location on the planet, and it's second to the Golden Gate Bridge.
That's right.
Yeah, it's very strange.
it begs the question, okay, what came first, like the chicken or the egg? Did people just think one day somebody chose this as being a good spot to do that? And then people, word of mouth spreads, and through the power of suggestive thinking and networking, people just are drawn to these places from who knows how long ago, people doing this to begin with, which creates sort of an attraction point? Or is it something more metaphysical? Is it something more spiritual in terms of there being like an energetic draw or some sort of magnet from spirit that draws people there to end their lives as maybe a safe place to travel, or maybe it's more nefarious, more malevolent sort of place, energy that draws people there to take their lives for some sort of harvesting reason. Maybe people that die there, their spirits and their consciousness, or their soul, if you will, maybe it doesn't cross over right. Maybe it stays, or maybe there's like some sort of creature or demiurge that's collecting humans. I don't know. I'm just theorizing here in terms of like the overall question is why that bridge, why that forest, right?
Well, it's interesting you say that, because there's a practice that used to be practiced in Japan, and I wish I could remember the name of it, and I don't off the top of my head, but what it consisted of, and it's pretty sinister, folks, but you have to think these are different times. This isn't current day, where people would take their parents or their grandparents, they would take elderly individuals that were no longer really able to take care of themselves, and I hate to say it, but have become a burden. That's how they were looked at, as, at this point, you have to be taken care of around the clock. They weren't putting people in nursing facilities and things during this time period. So a common practice was to take these elderly people deep into the forest and leave them there to die. And this happened in Japan, and this happened in the Aokigahara Forest. And there was a lot of honor, and still is a lot of honor in Japanese culture. So it wasn't like you took this person there screaming and clawing, although I'm sure some of them didn't want to die, maybe did put up a little bit of a fight. They kind of went there with pride. So it wasn't uncommon for someone to take their own parents, their own mother, and carry them to the top of the mountain and leave them there and say farewell and never see them again. And what I heard when I was doing my research is that along the way, while carrying this person on your shoulder, on your back, they would break twigs off of trees and drop them to leave a trail for their loved one to find their way home. So you're taking your mother to the top of the mountain to leave her there to die, and she's breaking twigs for you to find your way back out. And at the top, you have a last hug and kiss and say goodbye, and that's it. Now, as I said, I don't think it was always as glamorous as this. There were people that probably did not want to go and were taken there and left. So a big theory is that this land is haunted and inhabited by the spirits of these people who were left there to die, these people who never were given a proper burial or proper laying to rest, who some of them are still in that forest, even though they do send people there every year throughout the months to go through and find bodies and collect them. There's endless bodies in this forest, and something we'll talk about a little bit later, but I'm sure there still certainly remains deep into the ground from people who died there 100 or hundreds of years ago. And that's one of the things. Now, the ghosts of the dead in Japanese culture are called the yuri. And the yuri are not just ghosts of the dead, they're the ghosts of the dead who were not laid to rest, who maybe found an abrupt end or a violent end and did not find peace in their last moments. And they are said to be ghosts that haunt specific areas and are more malicious or malevolent beings or spirits. Now, another thing that they talk about in the Aokigahara Forest is that they believe that it's haunted by demons, and they're called Tengu. Tengu are the demons that haunt this area, that are said, as Dan actually said, kind of just in a general sense, they are known to pull people in. And one of the very interesting things about this is you would think this was just a forest where people travel to kill themselves. They had it planned, but that is not always the case. There's numerous reports of people being stopped entering the woods, or once they're in the woods being found by someone who's trying to talk them out of doing this. Why don't we, go back out? Let's, take some time to think about this. And once the person leaves the woods and are no longer close to this forest, they seem to snap out of some type of trance. And they're like, I'm not suicidal. I never wanted to kill myself. I don't know why I was there. I don't know why. I felt like something was pulling me. There's numerous reports of people saying, I felt like something was pulling me there.
So then the question why there could be some sort of like magnetic, spiritual, metaphysical, etheric force that draws people in. And then that, leads to the next question is, what is happening to the consciousness or to the spirit of the people that do pass there? Are they being harvested? Are they being, kept and contained and imprisoned, or are they crossing over where they're supposed to go? And this is just like an attraction point for people to end their lives, their consciousness, their incarnations, if you will. So
what's interesting, because one thing I find to be very interesting about this location, and it might help answer some of your questions there, and I've talked about this in some of my paranormal presentations that I've given and some teachings that I've done. One of the things, folks, this forest is around 1,200 years old. Now, it's not to say that there wasn't forest there before that, but how we know that it's 1,200 years old is that in 864 CE, the volcano there at Mount Fuji erupted and completely covered everything in the vicinity with a layer of liquid hot lava or magma, destroying anything close by. Now, just like fire, the lava, after destroying what would have been there previously, lays a beautiful foundation for further growth of new forest. Oftentimes where there's wildfires, for years there's nothing, and then illustrious forest grows from that because the minerals are rich from the burnt trees, the burnt grass, the burnt land. Same thing with here. It left the perfect breeding ground for a new forest. Not only did it grow a new forest, it grew a very dense forest. I mean, it is thick, and that's one thing that everyone talks about when they talk about this forest, is how incredibly dense and thick it is. There are trails that some people commonly walk on, because not only is this a forest known for suicide, but this is a beautiful forest that people will go to hike, that people will go to for taking pictures and wildlife. I mean, it's a known forest. But there are trails marked where it says pretty much like, do not enter at your own risk, because if you take this trail, you're most likely going to get lost. It is too dense. Now, the reason I bring these things up is one thing that an entire floor bed of magma or lava rock will have in it is iron. What does iron do? It throws off compasses. It throws off cellular, service. So people will talk about, almost like it's a paranormal thing, like the forest is so haunted that my cell phone doesn't work there, the compasses go haywire. No, it's nothing to do with paranormal activity. It is the iron that's in the rock below the forest bed throwing off these devices. Now, the reason that I bring this up, folks, is I have talked to individuals before about iron deposits and lime deposits do something to the human mind. When there is high clusters of this under the ground that you're at, it can make for feelings of uneasiness, it can make for paranoia, it can make you feel a denseness in the air, and it is known to spark supernatural phenomena where there's high iron deposits. For some reason, there's often a lot of sightings of cryptids. There's often a lot of sightings of UFOs. There's sightings of paranormal and ghostly apparitions. One of the other things that I think that it does is I think that it is almost like a natural mineral hallucinogen. I believe that when you have high deposits of iron like this, it interacts with the human mind and causes different type of phenomena within ourselves, visualizations, feelings, paranoia, and in this case, possibly a pull to bring people there to end their life. Why that is, I can't begin to tell you that. But it did strike me that the amount of iron deposit in this forest is just off the charts because of what happened, when the volcano erupted. So to answer your question, Dan, that's something I've been pondering on that very well could have something to do with that. And also because of that weird feeling might be the reason animals don't go there, because they feel it too. They know something's not right here. And people always say about being uneasy there. Other places with large deposits like that, people have said that same thing. It feels very dense here. It feels something's off. I just don't like the feeling that I have when I'm there. That has to have something to do with it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've studied quite a bit the way obviously crystals, but not just crystals, but metals. Certain types of metals have spiritual implications and ramifications. And maybe if you were in sort of like the New Agey community, you've heard about the way crystals are used, but then there's hematite. And it's said that hematite is often used to balance your energy, but also sort of repel negative energy and maybe even protect you from negative spirits and entities and things of that nature. And then when you talk about iron also, like you said, it could be an attractive item. It can be a repulsive item. And so if it's rich in that area, then there could obviously be, etheric or, sort of non-physical entities that are attracted to it. So I do resonate with that very much.
And it's interesting, too, because you would think, okay, with such a high suicide count, that how many of the locals are doing this? Barely any. That's what's interesting, is the locals don't go into this forest. The people that live around Mount Fuji do not go there for fun, for hiking, for anything. And the people taking their own life are not the locals. They have been taught since birth, pretty much, that this is a haunted, very bad place that you just do not go to, because it is haunted by the Yuri and the Tengu. And it is interesting. I mean, obviously, if it's 862... 864 CE rather, it's been that for a long time. So, I mean, we only know the stats in the last 100 years, but obviously there's been something going on there for a very, very long time that's just no longer publicized or documented.
Just a little side note, you mentioned about how the locals perceive that area, that phenomenon differently than travelers. It's funny. It's kind of like that everywhere. If you go to a paranormal hotspot or you go to a small town with a local history that draws tourists, the locals almost never perceive the thing that everybody knows about the way that the travelers and the tourists do. And I think there's something that people could learn from that phenomenon in of its own. Like, just a little side story. There is a place, I think it's in Pennsylvania, it might be West Virginia, where it's right there on the border, that inspired the actual story in the town of Silent Hill, the popular video games that have then turned into cinema and movies. But it's actually, there was a real actual coal mine fire that burned underground, and smoke and ash rose up from the ground. And you can actually still go there to this day and still see a couple little spots where there's still some fire and some smolders coming in from the earth. And I went there to get a couple clips of a short film that I was doing, like a fan film a million years ago. And it's like the locals there don't perceive the experience the way that the tourists do. And they're generally a little combative, a little sort of distrusting and even angry at the tourists who want to come there and take some pictures and some videos of this phenomenon that was maybe historically important at one time, but isn't anymore. And now it just draws a lot of unwanted, unnecessary traffic to it, whether it's, just out of people's interest or for the wrong reasons. And when I went there with my partner, my friend Tara at the time, to do the video clips, like the locals were kind of nasty to us, and they were just like, "Oh, look, more people here to see the Silent Hill," it's kind of like that everywhere.
It is. And then, you know what? The town you're talking about, that's Centralia.
That's right. That's right. I couldn't think of the name. Thank you.
It is in Pennsylvania, still burning. I mean, all these decades later, still burning underground, which is fascinating when you think about it. How the hell does that work? Every day for, I don't know how many years it's been, but it's been decades. It's still on fire.
Mm-hmm. It's amazing, and I can see why people would want to go there and see it. I certainly did. But I also understand how the locals get really tired of it, tired of the people who want to come there and see the attraction point and take their pictures and leave their garbage and then they're gone. So when it comes to something that's much more sensitive, like a suicide forest for people that are loved, go to take their lives, I could also see how the locals there, would have a different perception of it than the people who go there maybe for the just to go there to take pictures and say that you were there. I'm sure a lot of people go there just for that, let alone to die.
Well, and you think you'd just be afraid of it. You know what I mean? Like if you knew that you lived, let's say, 10 miles from this forest that thousands upon thousands of people have killed themselves. I mean, are you going to go there? We sometimes from the Western world or from other areas in the world are like, oh, it's a cool visit spot. I'm not staying long. I'm not suicidal. I'm going to go there. But when you live there, you don't want to play with fire. No pun intended, since we were just talking about Centralia. But, you don't want to go, messing around in this forest and then go home and then all of a sudden keep feeling this urge that, like, I need to go back there. For some reason, I need to go back there. It's easy whenever you're there for like the day and 2 days later you're getting on a plane and flying across the country. You're not going back there. And the chance of ever going back to Japan again, I'm sure for most people, is slim to none. I mean, it's not exactly a cheap flight and it's not an easy destination. But if you're someone who's living there day in and day out for your entire life, you really don't want to go playing with fire and then be stuck there and keep feeling this weird urge, because people talk about this. I had this urge to go there. I don't know why I've taken... Or, I don't know why I was going to take my own life. That is strange, because, a lot of people went there because they did truly want to end their life. But how many people over the years have ended their life maybe they weren't suicidal at all?
Right. That they go there and then maybe they're like enchanted, or they're like charmed, almost like possessed to commit suicide. I wonder.
It's really interesting because it's towards the top of the mountain, so it's very dense forest, Daniel, like I said. So it's like back to back to back trees. It's very dark even in the day, like I said. And as you go deeper and deeper, it's like a mind fuck of a forest. Like, you can't find your way out. People have went in there not trying to kill themselves and just died because they've gotten lost numerous times. But there's a giant clearing where there was said to be a very profound UFO sighting at one point in time. And that entire clearing that the UFO was seen is a giant circle on the mountainside that there's no trees growing at all. It's the only place that there's no trees growing. So it's very interesting that it's just some of the densest forest you've ever seen, and then where there has been known UFO activity is an area where they could easily land, no trees at all, and it's a beautiful grassy clearing.
Okay, well, here's a little curveball, because I always have to say something really like awkward on all of our episodes that gets people thinking. But in a previous episode, we mentioned the Super Soldier program, which dives heavy into a suppressed, hidden alternative technology that we know nothing about as civilians. And in the Super Soldier programs, I've investigated a lot of stories about how your consciousness, your being, if you want to call it a soul or a spirit, it sort of inhabits your avatar, your physical vessel, your body. Well, in the Super Soldier programs, when they send somebody out on a fight or a war or to a hostile planet where a lot of people die, it's said that when they die in battle, they can actually intercept your consciousness when it leaves your body, and they can move your consciousness into a clone of yourself and wake you back up and send you back out there to fight again. Now, that does sound pretty far-fetched. It's very sci-fi, something you might only see in movies. But hypothetically speaking, let's say that there is like mass death at this suicide forest, and there are extraterrestrials, what I call a star family, maybe monitoring the area, or maybe if they're connected to people on Earth, there's maybe some sort of like incarnational connection. Then they know who you are in your life. And if you're going to go there and die, wouldn't that be weird if like the aliens knew you were going to go commit suicide, and then when you die, they extract your consciousness, like to lift you from the forest so that you don't get like imprisoned by the malevolent entities that are stalking the land, or maybe so that you don't go to the wrong place when you leave your body or something? Isn't that kind of weird?
That is weird. And I mean, I have to feel that there's something harvesting these souls, or the sorrow or the pain, whether it be something of alienistic nature, whether it be some type of program, government program or alien program that's doing this, or it just be the souls or the demons or the spirits themselves. You have to think that is a great thing that parasitic entities love to feed off of, is your sorrow, your pain, your anger. And that's why a lot of hauntings go bad. Someone becomes very angry or has some type of high emotion that they feed off of. What better way, if there's multiple of these things that could maybe pull together and use the iron in the ground somehow as an enhancer or a frequency signal that they can send out as almost like a tractor beam and pull in people to end their own life, people that are and also are not suicidal. And then as they die, they feed on that soul. So as you said, maybe their souls don't reach another realm. Maybe they're devoured at the point of death, because before they can go anywhere, you have something waiting there for them to feast off them, making them stronger and stronger, therefore pulling more and more people in. And hence why the numbers continuously keep climbing and climbing, despite them no longer publicizing it and doing anything they can to deter people from killing themselves. They have
Who knows, dude? Maybe even like their local government or their leadership knows about a spiritual implications, some sort of harvesting ground. They want to keep humans from going in there and feeding it.
I have
like the Twilight Zone.
I have some fans sending me some stuff here, which is interesting. So I said Tengu was the spirits that they were calling demons. Now he sent me something said that Tengu is also referred to as heavenly dog or heavenly sentinel, or a type of legendary creature found in Japanese folk religion. They're considered a type of yokai, supernatural being, and they often take the forms of birds of prey. They come as monkey deities. Now, it's a lot to read right now, so I'm going to jump into it. It's interesting, though, because anytime I've ever heard of Tengu, they've always referred to them in a very negative light of demonic beings. The very first thing this says in this wiki is that Tengu is also called heavenly dogs or heavenly sentinels. So, well, I'm not sure how heavenly these things are, but it's interesting that they're called that. And he also sent me, his name's Merrick, he also sent me the name of that practice called Ubasuti. And if I'm pronouncing this wrong for anybody out there that might speak fluent Japanese or anybody that is Japanese out there, I apologize. But Ubasuti is the practice of abandoning an old woman, though it's not said that it was only women. But it is the practice of abandoning an old woman or an older person in the forest to die. That's what it's called.
I see.
Thank you very much, Merrick, for your sending that over. I sometimes don't always have all the research at the tip of my finger, so I really appreciate that. He says, he spelled it out for me. Ubasoti. Ubasoti. Okay, so that's how it's pronounced. My other language abilities is not the best. Now, let me take a look here. One of the things, Dan, I thought was really interesting, too, and I get it, I guess, but it is still, to me, strange, is when you go into the forest here, you will find tape, rope, and string everywhere. The reason that this is when people go into the forest, they tie a rope, string, or tape to a tree, and they go deeper and deeper into the forest, and they run this along the trees and will tie it to specific trees. Now, why that's strange is if you were going there just to end your life, why would you need a way back? And they say that's the reason that people do it, is if they decide, you know what, I don't want to do this, they can follow their trail back because it is so dense. And this will kind of give you a picture, folks, of how bad this is as far as density, that you don't find your way back. There are people that went there, decided, hey, I'm not going to take my own life, and then died anyway because they couldn't get back out. They couldn't figure it out. So people will do this. But they're just everywhere. You walk into this forest, and how eerie is that to look around and see ropes everywhere? And that's how the searchers and forest workers find dead bodies. You just find a rope, and you follow it deeper into the forest. And usually when the rope stops, you look around that area, and more often than not, there is a dead body laying there. And the number one form of suicide in Japan, or at least in Japan in general, but in the Aokigahara Forest, is hanging, which is interesting. People are not going there often and shooting themselves. They're not going there and cutting their own wrists or anything like that. They are going there and hanging themselves. It's by far overshadows all the other forms. It only is seconded by poisoning of oneself, and you could still call it poisoning. Sleeping pills is a big one, where people eat a whole bottle of sleeping pills, though often takes a long time to die, and it's a very bad way to go. People think they're just going to fall asleep and die. A lot of times that's not how it happens. But it seems like the number one by far is hanging, which is very interesting that would be the way everybody chooses to go into this forest and hang themselves.
So on that note, it's also said that sometimes based on how traumatic your physical death experience is, can have an influence on what happens to your consciousness, to your being on the other side. I think that suffocating, whether you're drowning or whether you suffocate in a fire or whether you suffocate and you're choking, hanging from a noose, I don't know from experience, but I feel like that would be traumatic. So maybe people are influenced to hang themselves, to go through that trauma and the sort of painful, slower process of asphyxiation, because the trauma that instills in imprints. I'm also told that trauma can imprint on the soul based on how you die as well. That will also maybe create you more of a valuable resource, more of an attractive sort of energy to feed on. after your death.
When you'd think it'd have to have something to do with some ulterior force. No, I mean, different cultures have different beliefs, but, you know, if I was going to go into the forest and kill myself, it probably wouldn't be by hanging. I'd probably go in there and just cap myself. You know what I mean? And that'd be it. I think maybe that's maybe more, just bust a cap. I think that's maybe more of an American thing, but it's just odd that so many people go in there and hang themselves. Now, what's crazy about that? It is not uncommon at all, folks, to go here and walk around this forest and to see dead bodies. I mean, it's pretty much a given. If you go in there and start walking around and really, you know, do some exploring, you're going to find either someone there dead, fresh, or newly fresh, or you're going to see human remains. I mean, there are skulls laying throughout the woods. There are full skeletons laying there with clothes still on them. I mean, it is a very horrific and sad thing, and that is the way that people choose. Now, there was one of the things I read, or I'd watched a documentary, I'm not sure. People, you know, have this belief that strangulation is actually not painful. They think it's actually more one of the less painful ways of going. And there was someone in this forest that tried to do that and didn't die, and said about how excruciatingly painful it was, and he didn't think it was going to be. So, I mean, that tells you, and I don't know why anybody would believe it wouldn't be painful. You have a rope go tight around your throat, it's going to hurt like hell. But that seems to be the way, and it almost, here's a far-out idea. Side note, what if it's not aliens? What if it's not, you know, secret space program? What if it's not the government? What if it's not, you know, the ghosts of the dead or the Tengu or any of these things? What if it's the trees?
Ooh, fascinating.
Because here's my thoughts. Very dense forest, eerie trees, very, very dense, unlike most forests out there. It's calling to people. Well, trees produce oxygen, you know, and we need trees to survive. And trees do communicate with one another, and trees have a big part of the world. What if they're sending out a signal drawing people in? And why are people hanging themselves? Because you're hanging yourselves from the trees, the ropes connected to the tree. The soul and the energy and life force of that person as it leaves their body travels up the rope into the tree, absorbing that, causing further growth of the forest, causing further expansion of this phenomena. What if it's the trees, folks?
I mean, I'll consider it. I could do a whole episode on tree consciousness. I mean, on my other show, That's So Meta, we do have a full hour-long episode about trees. And I can tell you guys without a shadow of a doubt, they are conscious like humans.
Absolutely.
They can't exactly move like we do, obviously, but they are aware. They have a self-awareness. They have personalities. They have identity. And they're extremely multidimensional as well. You're seeing a physical, you know, plant creature that's rooted into the ground, large, massive, and beautiful, but it also transcends dimensions. And I've seen what trees can see, and they can actually see multiple time periods. It's extremely bizarre. So I wouldn't, you know, put that idea too far outside of the realm of possibility, because I know that they're very conscious.
Well, and you know what? Maybe it's a way of them striking back. You know, trees have been mistreated. They're cut down. You know, people destroy the forest left and right. They don't hear, and this is a way that these trees make a stand and say, we're going to get ours and get back. Or maybe the iron and the lava rock causes change in them. We think of trees normally as these beautiful things. Maybe they are, but maybe the minerals under the ground cause a different conscious change or pitch to them, causing them to be more of a sinister nature, the same way it does a lot of times in hauntings. So it's a very interesting thing to think about. You know, and there's trees out there can do amazing things, folks. I won't get into it, but there are spells and magic that people can use trees for, such as if you have an injury, there are very specific ways that you can use a tree to heal yourself instantly. So when we think of like Wolverine instantly gets a cut and zoop, it's healed. That's actually a real thing, but most just don't believe it's real or know about it. And that can be done very quickly, very easily by the use of trees. That's right. That's all I'm going to say. Now, real quick, though, because you got me off on trees now, I'm all excited about trees because I actually love trees very much. I have a tree in the town that I live in that I see every time I do my daily walk. I walk about maybe 3-4 times a week, and I go by this tree, and its name is Micah. That's not the name that I give it. That's the name that it gave me in meditation. And whenever I'm having medical issues or maybe I have a question about a mystery in my life, sometimes I'll actually go to this tree, Micah, and literally ask the tree,
what its perspective is on sort of this situation in my life. And it was just 2 days ago, I went to the tree and meditated on a problem that I'm having in my life, and it gave me in meditation an actionable exercise that I can do using visualizations to help improve my situation. And this is something that the tree gave me. Okay, so I do believe they're very powerful healers in that way.
They are. I mean, it's amazing the different things you can use trees for. That's why also in ancient grimoires and in magic, you would use specific types of trees. And people thought that was just like a weird thing. I'm reading, the Ars Goetia, or I'm reading, different books. I mean, whether it be the Grand Grimoire or the Grimoire Verum, and it will say specifically you must use an oak or you must use a mahogany sapling that has never, been cut by any other blade, never has spawned fruit, and must be cut with one cut on a moon of Saturn on a Tuesday. It gets into these specific things, and people don't realize
on a
why.
Tuesday.
And then, no, dude, they get specific. Yeah, Tuesday night at 12 o'clock with a virgin blade that's never cut anything else. It must be cut in one swipe and be of a brand new tree that has never bore fruit. All these fucking crazy things. But there are reasons behind all that. It's not just gibberish. A lot of people think it's blinds that are just thrown in there. Oh, they try to make it so complex. No, there actually is a purpose, and different types of woods give off different type of energies, which create different type of results and energies in ritualistic magic. So yeah, trees are very potent, and it's definitely something that I find interesting and could be possible with this forest. One of the other things I wanted to jump into is why I find this forest to be terrifying. Obviously, everybody's probably like, well, dude, you've already said a million things that make it terrifying. No. So as a paranormal investigator for many, many years, I'm a little bit odd in the fact that I go out to locations throughout the country by myself. I would travel across several states, stay there for a weekend, drive home 100% alone. Not too many people do that. This has been the one location that if you ask me what was my top location, if you had to pick one location in the world, where would it be? It would be this location. I would go to the Aokigahara Forest, and I would spend a night or a couple nights there in the forest alone. I know a lot of people find that hard to believe. That's just who I am. But where I do find this terrifying, it's one thing to be afraid or a little hesitant of the spirits that are there, or the feeling of the area there, or some type of force pulling you towards wanting to end your life, because I'm not suicidal. So I knew if I started to feel that way, something's off. Then you could be scared of the cryptids that might be there, the alien beings that might be there, this and that. But what makes it scarier for me is the human beings. Because if you're there in the middle of the night, you all of a sudden see something moving in the woods, there's a good chance it's just someone wandering in the woods in the middle of the night. Because if you watch any footage of this forest, there are people who go out and search for these people to try to deter them from taking their own life. And they'll be searching and searching. You don't see anything, and all of a sudden you walk over one little bump in the forest, and down below there's a tent right there you never seen. You walk by it 6 times, all of a sudden it's there because it's so dense. And there's someone sitting in that tent still alive. One of the documentaries I watched, there was a guy who had been there for over a month, surviving on liquid alone, no food, starving himself out, and had been there for a month. Can you imagine going to a forest and spending a month alone, starving yourself in this forest? How delirious and out there you would be. And you have these type of folks wandering these woods. So in the middle of the night, someone like myself, paranormal, researcher, hears a sound in the woods, and you're thinking, what kind of creature or what is this? And you go out there, and it's just someone who's mentally insane at this point, wandering the woods, who is already there to take their own life. What's to say they won't take yours? But strangely enough, there's really no talks of anybody murdering anybody here, which I find to be fascinating as well. With all these people that are suffering from mental illness, all these people that are depressed, all these people that are going there to take their own lives, or who may go there like this gentleman and starve yourself and start to go to delirium. You don't hear of people taking other people's lives, only their own. I'm sure it has happened, but it's not like a heavy occurrence. So that's very interesting as well. With as much death that's there, it's usually only at one's own hands.
Well, I mean, that makes more sense to me than you might think, speaking from a psychological perspective. I mean, when somebody's in depression, when they're anxiety, when they're having mental health issues, the last thing you want to do is be around people. Generally speaking, I also feel people people that I know who have been suicidal generally feel a type of shame. They feel a type of guilt even before they pass, if they do go through with it. And so I think that you don't want to be, generally speaking, you don't want to be near anyone or be around people. So if you run into them out there, you might even hide or, try to make your own way just out of the weird sort of like unspoken understanding between you and the others out there that, oh, I know why you're here. There's only one reason to be here. You probably know why I'm here, and I just want to be away from you. I want to go do my own thing. Unless somebody is like so fucking weird and whacked out that they go there to kill people, it's unlikely. So I think that in terms of like being murderous, no, I think if anything, people want to be alone. That's why they're going there.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that because, I mean, most people go in there, they are going deep into the forest and, ending their own life. So, I mean, they're not really, they're not really looking to have interaction. And even the one that I said that I seen in this documentary where they did find a guy in a tent and he had been starving himself, when they approached him, he hurried up and jumped inside the door and zipped it shut. He didn't even want to be seen. He didn't want to have that interaction. Now, they end up saving this gentleman. Who knows if he, end up going back and finishing it off or doing it in his own home or something. But I just found that to be very interesting that he'd been there for a month. There's not too many sets of forests so you can just go set up camp for a month and not be discovered by people. This is the first time probably anybody approached him in a whole month's time. And it's like that throughout the forest. There's people all through it. And there's bodies all through it. And I mean, what a crazy image, folks, to have in your mind. How many times have you walked through the woods? Some people don't go to the woods that often. Myself, I spend a lot of time in the forest. Walking, absorbing nature. Now imagine that same walk, and throughout that walk you see 6 different areas of human remains just laying there open. No grave markers, just skulls, or you look up and there's just a skeleton hanging from a tree or a fresh body hanging from a tree. That is the scenery of this place. No, I'm not trying to glorify this or do what a lot of people have. There's people that try to use this forest to get publicity. No, by no means. I'm talking about this forest tonight to bring, a very severe affliction on the human culture that needs to be addressed, which is suicide. If you're feeling this way, you need to seek help. I mean, and we don't want to see anybody going out there doing this, but this is happening, and it is a phenomena that it's happening in the numbers that it is. And it's sad to know, Dan, I don't know if you knew this statistic, that Japan has over 21,000 suicides a year. That's massive. I don't know if it's the most in the world, but I would have to say it has to be pretty damn close. I mean, that is a lot. I don't know what the national average in America is for suicides. It's not anywhere near that high. So it's interesting because suicide was something only done by the samurai once upon a time in Japan. It was actually considered honorable. That if you were captured or you knew that you were soon to be captured, a samurai would take their own life. They would not be captured. It was a thing of honor. So a lot of times you hear people say, well, Japan has such a huge suicide rate and so many people kill themselves in the Aokigahara Forest because it's an honorable thing to do. No, actually, a lot of Japanese folks believe that it's dishonorable to do that. In the case of the samurai, it was one thing, but to just go end your life is not honorable. And that's why they try to go out and stop people from doing it. There's signs within the forest. Signs even saying, like, please turn back now. Think of your parents. Think of your family. They love you. You're not just killing yourself. There's signs all through the forest like that. I mean, I've been to a lot of forests. I've never seen signs that say that. So that's just another surreal thing that you come upon a sign that says, please don't take your life. Think of your family. These are common things you see there.
Yeah, that's actually really heartbreaking and ominous in its own right. Like right when you get there, there's like posters and, phone numbers you can call for help and people who will stop what they're doing and come get you right away if you decide you want to leave. There's all these, like you said, signs that just turn around, go back. That's really heartbreaking. This whole thing is actually really sad.
Well, in the parking lot, I mean, would you go there? There's cars that have been sitting there for weeks or months. Now, they do tow them eventually. But, I mean, when you go there, it's not uncommon in the main parking lot of this forest to see several cars covered in leaves or covered in bristles from the trees that are shedding, that have obviously been sitting there for weeks or months because their owner parked there and then never came back. Yeah. There's also a pile of shoes outside of the entrance to the forest where there's shoes from the vehicles and shoes that were left outside of vehicles and this and that. They stacked this mountain of shoes as a way, like a symbolic thing where, you know, as the owner comes back out, reclaim your shoes, but they weren't reclaimed because most of these people were never coming back out of that woods. It's a one-way ticket, a one-way journey. Now, Merrick had sent something, and I know of this as well. In Buddhist belief, there are spirits called nagas, which are serpent-like nature spirits, usually found by rivers, lakes, and ponds, which do not take kindly to people trampling on their habitat in the forest or messing with their environment. And if you assault them or insult them, I should say, they will afflict you with poverty, cancer, insanity, skin disease, etc. And he says, why not mental health issues or suicide? Don't piss in the river, he said. And this is actually a real thing. I've actually read about this before where there are people who in different cultures have went into the woods, cut down trees, or pissed into the river, ripped up rocks, and then all of a sudden started having massive misfortune befall them because they were afflicted by the nagas, these land spirits that are in certain cultures. It's very interesting. He also said very Agori-like charnel grounds, which the Agori are a type of Hindu spiritualists who practice very, very intense practices that most would find to be disgusting, but they feel that everything is empowered by the source of God, so there's nothing more important than anything else, and there's nothing off limits because everything is empowered with the source of the one. So, for instance, drinking your own piss, you're drinking God. Nothing's off limits. And I don't want to say that like as a way that these are like bad people or anything. They actually practice an extreme source of spiritualism by making everything equal to everything else and nothing being taboo or off limits and everything being one. You discover one.
Well, I see that because if you neutralize the polarity and the contrast and the duality of everything that it means to be other than or separated by, then sort of in a sense, I don't want to use the word normalizing, but validating everything and inverting it sometimes can create that sort of like neutral state, which I do actually resonate with to a degree.
Well, yeah, they practice that. I mean, there's some very extreme practices, but I mean, as a lot of Hindus or Buddhists, I mean, they do practice even using like the Kapala, which I use a Kapala in my magical practice, a human skull bowl, and they will eat from that and drink from that consistently. That is their only. They don't use, plates or silverware. They use their hands and they eat and drink out of this skull bowl all day, every day. That is, they carry it with them. But they take this from the charnel grounds, which is where they burn the bodies in India, where they will take newly deceased bodies down to the river and they put them on a funeral pyre and they burn them. So there are many bones just laying around. There are just skulls. There are things of this nature. And one of the things that they do is they will eat human flesh sometimes as a symbolism of that this is not off limits. And people would say cannibalism, that's disgusting, that's sick. You come from a different culture, folks. So a lot of times we as Americans, there's people from other countries that listen to us, so I'm only talking to the American side. As Americans, we oftentimes think like, oh, that's disgusting or that's wrong. No, you only believe it's disgusting and wrong because that's what you were raised to believe. No, you're allowed to have your beliefs, but just because you were raised to believe one thing doesn't mean that it's wrong, because other people from other cultures were raised with just as adamant beliefs in other things. And that's what they push the boundaries to is like I said, they bring the duality and the polarities together into the center at 0 point. And everything is open. And it's very interesting that we're talking about this, because the last point that I wanted to make was that they say that the first person to ever be logged as dying in the Aokigahara Forest was a Buddhist monk who went there for a purification ritual and went too far into the forest and couldn't find his way out and ultimately succumbed to either starvation or the weather and died there. Now, instead of deterring people or deterring other monks, it actually made this a popular spot for Buddhist monks to travel to for their purification rituals. I think this, and a lot of people say, well, why would they do that if one of their brothers died? I think that's why they do it, that they go there to purify themselves, and if they die during the purification, then so be it, because they weren't meant to come out. If they come out purified. But it is very interesting that we were just talking about the Agori and different spirits in Hinduism and Buddhism, and the first person ever said to have died here is a Buddhist monk.
Yeah, man, I hear you loud and clear. It's I'm a little bit out of a loss for words on like the whole phenomenon in of itself. But as we come to a close in the episode, I do have some reference material for everybody listening. If they're interested, my language is entertainment. That's the field that I work in, and it's my purpose. So there were 3 little things I wanted to tell you guys about that you might be able to investigate or research yourself, or if you like films. The one thing before I get into some movies that you guys can check out is there is a video game. And I played it a little bit, but I was actually more enamored by the lore and the setting and the backstory of this video game than playing it itself. And the video game was called Dead by Daylight. And the premise is that there are groups of people, who knows how many groups of people, a variety of different ages, different time periods, that seem to be in this alternate dimension, this sort of afterlife, where there's this entity, this a demiurge type of thing, like almost like a little bit of I'm trying to compare it to something like a Cthulhu type of entity, where what it does is it entraps people into a life or death scenario where they're being hunted and killed by a creature. And as they die, they are harvested by the entity, and he feeds on them and gets stronger and grows to be greater. And then after the person is dead, they actually sort of wake back up with almost like a type of like light amnesia. And then they're back into a mysterious street or a forest where they're running for their lives, and there's something that's trying to kill them until ultimately they die again. And this creature just harvests them over and over and over and over and over, and he's feeding on their fear, he's feeding on their death, he's feeding on their energy. And there's basically recycling their souls infinite numbers of times for whatever nefarious, malevolent reason he has. So earlier on in the episode, when we were talking about, is there sort of, an invisible force that might be drawing people in and feeding on them and maybe capturing their souls? That is a popular video game that sort of depicts something similar. So I wanted to reference that as something people could investigate. The lore of the game is interesting anyways.
No, very interesting. I mean, sometimes I think that these things are certainly, as you know, in pop culture and in movies and comics and all these things are referencing things that happen in real life. And I mean, I don't think they specifically made this video game because of the Aokigahara Forest, but, it's interesting when you run across these synchronicities that you're like, that's kind of similar to what I believe is going on there. And there's definitely, folks, something going on there. So if you have thoughts or ideas of what you believe is happening there, please drop us a line at celestialoddities@gmail.com. Drop us a line at the Celestial Oddities group page. We, encourage you to add that page. Tell us what you want to see us talk about in further episodes. We have many episodes left of Season 3. We like to deep dive into what it is you guys want to talk about, whether we already know about it or we have to research further into it. We love doing the research. We love deep diving into these topics and ideas. So let us know what you think is happening in Japan with this forest and why so many people are attracted to go there and take their own life. We would love to hear it. And we have a comment came in real quick before we finish up the episode. To be fair, though, cannibalism does lead to certain diseases and illnesses. I mean, yes, it does, but in some cultures, that is a way of life. And I mean, we can say it's wrong, but if we grew up on the other side of the road learning what they did, would we think it's wrong? When you go to very deep in the middle of a very thick forest and find native cultures who haven't been in contact with any people in hundreds or thousands of years. That's their way of life. That's what they do. And are they wrong? No, they're just different. And that's the way I look at it. I do think there's certain things that are off limits. So let's say that, folks. I mean, do I promote cannibalism? No. But do I think that I can understand it from a different lens? Yes. Something like pedophilia, I can't understand in any type of lens, in any type of culture, in any type of time period, though I know, hundreds of years ago, it wasn't uncommon to marry a 14-year-old girl or a 13-year-old girl. I'm not about it. But in other cultures it happens. So you have to always try to see, like, where's their perspective. Sometimes you have to call, this is my dead end. I'm not going past this. But I try to always look at it from different perspectives. And cannibalism, in other cultures is still practiced. So, but like I said, folks, if you have any thoughts, let us know what your thoughts are. Let us know what you think is going on there and any topics you want to see us discuss. And catch us back in 2 weeks for another awesome episode of Celestial Oddities, the PONG Paranormal Guys podcast. Dan, any closing thoughts?
Yeah, actually, as we do close out, I just wanted to circle back real quick on a little bit of more reference material that if people are interested in seeing the forest in mainstream entertainment, or you like watching movies. There are 2 recommendations I can give you right now. Actually, there is a movie called The Forest, which came out in 2016, and it is just a mystery sort of horror thriller movie. So if you're into that sort of type of film, it is set in the suicide forest. That might be interesting to you. And then the last one I was going to recommend is more of a drama, more of a spiritual drama. So if you like a tearjerker, you like something a little bit more hits you in the heart. I actually really like this movie. It's called The Sea of Trees, appropriately named The Sea of Trees, with Matthew McConaughey is in this one. And I won't spoil it for you, but it's more of an emotional sort of journey that, what it might be like for somebody going to this forest to take their own lives. So that's The Sea of Trees. I would recommend that film as well. And other than that, we just want to thank you guys very much for investigating this topic with us.
Absolutely. Well, guys, we look forward to seeing you in 2 weeks on Thursday night, 8:30 to 9:30 or 8:30 to 10, however long the episode runs. We'll be hanging out with you as always here at Celestial Oddities Radio. Everyone have a safe, great rest of your week, and we'll talk to you again soon. Take care.